Welcome to Deceased Mothers Society, aka Dead Moms Club. Today's guest is Leslie Draher. Leslie lives in Las Vegas, Nevada, and here we have a time lapse of me sketching her mom out in graphite. And Leslie shares the story of losing her mom, and also the story of her mom before Leslie was even born. It's lovely. Thank you for joining us today. It's a long one. Buckle in. My name is Marisa Bruneau, and welcome to the Deceased Mothers Society, which sounds a little classier. And today I have with us Leslie Draher. And thank you for coming. We were just talking earlier, and I remember how long we've known each other. I said, has it been, I know it's been over a year, but what is time anymore? We don't even know. But we determined it's been at least 2 years. And other than that, we can't tell you anymore. We know that we're friends, and I'm grateful to have, I call her Dre, but her name is Leslie.
Yeah. You can call me whichever one comes easier to you. Well, my mom's name was Ofelia Almeida. She was born in 1950 in a small town named Robstown, Texas. She was born she was adopted, so she was actually born in the house of the parents that were going to adopt her. Her mom was not capable of taking care of her. Her mom kind of lived, well, there's really no other way to put it, but she was living as a prostitute. So she had no way to take care of her daughters. So each daughter she ended up having 4 daughters, and my mom was one of them. Each daughter was either left with someone or left with their grandparents or whatever. But so my mom was lucky enough to get adopted by this couple who couldn't have children. And they brought her up as their own. So in fact, she became their favorite because my grandfather had 3 other kids in the house, and for some reason she became the favorite and had kind of like a second chance for them to raise kids or a child that was going to have potential, have education placed in her life, maybe college, maybe all these aspiring goals. But not unfortunately, but fortunately, I guess in a way, she met my father when she was 11. And so when she met my father, that was it for the both of them. They fell in love, and they were childhood sweethearts and high school sweethearts. And my grandfather knowingly at the time, he thought, well, maybe if I offer my daughter college, American Bandstand tickets, which was in California, and a new car, and college in California, maybe she won't marry this guy. And if I buy him a motorcycle, it'll give him way to kind of leave and not bother my mom anymore. So he did all of those things, and they ended up eloping anyway. So
on the motorcycle?
Not on the well, actually they might have on the motorcycle. I'm not exactly sure. But they ended up eloping. And at the age of 16, my mom was 16, my dad was 19, I believe. So the next day was kind of troublesome for my father because he had to go meet with my grandfather, who wasn't very happy at the time. But then things cleared up, and they moved into their own place. And when my mom was 18, then she had me. And my father was already a musician by that point. He had been a musician since he was 13, sneaking into bars and nightclubs, playing with the band and stuff. So he made a living doing that, and then had day jobs at the same time. So to be able to support us. Um, and my mom kind of stayed home and just took care of me. And it wasn't until about, I was probably maybe 12 or 13, my mom decided to get her GED. She had always worked in social work, so she kind of liked that field. And she especially liked working with kids. So she got her degrees in social work and certifications and all that she needed to do, and um, worked as a therapist for many years with domestic violence, in the mental health arena, where she helped kids or just families in need, housing, anything that they needed, court reprimanded classes, anything that had to do with social work. She was in it. Um, to her and to my grandfather, education was like the number one thing. So she pushed education on me from an early age, taught me a lot of responsibility from an early age, taught me not to depend on anyone, taught me to be very independent. Um, and so I learned really fast to take care of my own problems at a very early age. And but not it's not to say that she didn't go through a rough time because of her adoption. She kind of had a hole in her heart, not physically but metaphorically, um, because of the fact that she was adopted. She felt that abandonment from her birth mother, and she felt that abandonment throughout her entire life, uh, even up until years before she passed away. And it took her a long time to learn that my father and I truly loved her. I mean, it was probably in my 20s when she was still saying things. When she would get upset, she would say, "You don't love me. You're
Oh.
doing this because you don't love me.
Mhm.
You're going out because you don't love me. You're not, you're wanting to work instead of go to college because you don't love me." And there was things that sometimes I felt like I had to prove my love for her. And it was really tough. It was tough growing up with them because they were teenagers and I was young. There was only 18 years between us, so
Mhm.
it was like growing up with them. And that made it difficult at times because I had to be the parent a lot of times, because they didn't really get to have their teenage years or their 20s to explore and to do what a lot of other people get to do.
Mhm.
They got married and then they had a kid, and they had to work. And so um, then writing became a big deal for her, especially when she started to get her GED, and then started going to college. Um, she decided to write a novel, or not a novel, but like a self-help book. And
Oh.
so she started doing that. She finished that. Um, and so as an early kid, she kind of instilled that in me. She would say, write things down that come to your mind. And that became to journaling, that became to manifesting things that I wanted in my life. So I had to write things down that I wanted to manifest. And she believed in alternative healing. She believed in Reiki. She became a Reiki master.
Mhm.
And so she believed in a lot of things that you could manifest into your life by just allowing our creator into your life, allowing prayer, allowing meditation, allowing manifestation into your life, allowing connection to the universe. And so writing was a big deal. And so she started to get me to write at about, I don't know, I guess it was whatever age you're at, second grade. I started writing short little stories. And by the time I was in junior high, she encouraged me to write plays for the drama club. And so I would write plays. And then she said, one day I want you to write a movie. So I had no clue on how to do that. So I just researched the internet and found a script. I thought, this has got to be the way you write a script. And so I did that, and I was able to finish a script before she passed away. Unfortunately, fortunately, the script actually won me a couple of awards. But unfortunately, she was not around by that time. She passed away in 2005, and I won the awards like 5 or 6 years later after that. So, but yeah, that's one of the biggest inspirations, I guess, that she left with me, was that you can do anything because you can allow all power to be within you. If you just allow it to happen, do not allow yourself to be overwhelmed with negativity. Do not open the door to negativity or negative thoughts. You have to close that door and constantly open the door of positivity, manifestation, positive thinking, those kind of things. So she was a very positive influence, even though early on, because of her adoption, she had a lot of trauma in her life. Mm-hmm. Even as a child, she had a lot of trauma. So, because her home life wasn't perfect by any means, but it was as good as it got for her, and so she had a lot of childhood trauma that she was dealing with, and she already had the alcoholic gene in her. Oh. So she became an alcoholic for a while, but she gained heart issues closer to the end of her life, and that's when all the drinking stopped, and we had to kind of reevaluate the diet and the drinking situation. We had to do all that at home. And so that's when I feel like I had to parent a lot, because they would sneak in alcohol into the house and go to their bedroom and drink. And I had to go knock on the door and say, what's going on in here? So I had to remove the drinks and, throw them away. I'd say, you have heart issues. You've been to the doctor. You've had a heart attack. You cannot be drinking. This is just, so it wasn't all peaches and cherries and rainbows all the time, but I think with my mom, she was trying so hard that the pressures of feeling alone got to her a lot of times. So I kind of long-winded your question there, but that was a lot about my mom right there.
No, I think that a lot of that was new information to me too. We've in the past talked about this a lot, so a lot of it was new to me. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And are you comfortable speaking about leading up to when she passed away, and sort of how that was for you, and how you dealt with her loss, and planning the funeral and moving forward after that, and how things were after her death, especially in the early days, because people watching this or listening to this are wanting to feel less alone. So sharing your stories.
Yeah, she ended up like I said, she ended up with heart issues. She had early on, it was probably in the early 90s when she started having what they call angina attacks. And they weren't really exactly sure what was going on with her. But uh, we were in the process of moving out west from Michigan to out to Nevada. And so she had had a couple of these attacks, which at the time we weren't sure what was causing it. And it wasn't until we arrived here in Nevada that she started showing more signs and had another heart attack.
Oh,
At that time, we had my grandmother, her mother, move in with us because my grandmother was already at the age where she couldn't take care of herself anymore, and she was alone, living in Texas, and we needed to kind of take her in and start taking care of her. So we did that. We took on that responsibility, and that was probably like 2001 when we were living here in Nevada, and we took in my grandmother. And my mom kind of hid her sickness from my grandmother because she didn't want to worry her. And my grandmother was had severe Alzheimer's and dementia by that time. So we had to treat that situation very carefully. But one morning, my mom was going to have a test to check her angina. And it was a routine check. And we got up really early. We left the house very early, like 6:30 in the morning. And we went to the facility, and my dad and I waited out in the waiting room, not thinking anything of it. We just thought maybe they were going to do a test and see what they needed to do, maybe give her more medication or do a procedure. But all of a sudden, they came whizzing by like 5 or 6 physicians with my mom on a gurney and saying, we need to do a 5 artery open heart surgery. So I don't even know what that number is, the 5 arteries. So we thought, wait, what is going on? And I went in there and I talked to my mom, and I said, Mom, are you sure how is this possible? And she said, well, they took a look and they saw that my 5 arteries are completely clogged up and they need to do open heart surgery. And my mom, instead of being concerned about herself, she said, make sure you go home, and about when we're done here, when they get me all settled in, I want you to go home and make breakfast for your grandmother, make sure she's taken care of, and then come back. But I want you to make sure grandma's taken care of. So I thought, how can I do this? This was all happening so fast. This was within an hour to an hour and a half of us being there. So I said, I'm not going to leave you alone. She said, you're not. Your father's going to stay with me. And that wasn't enough for me because it had always been just the 3 of us. So my dad was like, she doesn't have to go right this very minute, and she said, no, I want you to go so that way you can come back. So I left. I had to leave. I went home, took care of my grandmother as fast as I could. I raced back to the hospital. They told us what they were going to need to do. was the open heart surgery. That the surgery was going to take anywhere between 5 to 6 hours. So we said, okay, 5 to 6 hours. We were really kind of worried and afraid because of the 5 arteries and the fact that she was just open heart, and so at that time we waited in the waiting room. They took her off to do the surgery, and it didn't take 5 to 6 hours. It took almost 13 hours. And when they finally came out, they said they had some complications after she came out. She was obviously covered in tubes and covered in an ice blanket, covered in all sorts of hospital mechanics, and we saw her for maybe 10 minutes, and then they said that they had missed something in one of her arteries. So they were going to have to take her back in and open her back up.
Oh.
So we were there from, I had left maybe around 8 in the morning to go home to take care of my grandmother. And I was gone for maybe an hour. So we were there for maybe total from 6:30 in the morning till about 3 o'clock the next morning, waiting to make sure that she was okay. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, they said, okay, we've taken everything out. She's cured, or not cured, but she's good to go. It's going to take time to recover. She's going to be in ICU for about maybe a week or two, and then we'll move her to another room so she can recover. And in about a month, she'll be able to go home and everything will be fine. So we thought, okay. So we stayed there at the hospital, and then my dad and I started taking turns. One of us would go home, take care of my grandmother, while the other one stayed with my mom. My mom was very sedated, so she was kept asleep because they had a tube down her throat, and they had tubes. They had a machine that was breathing for her. They had connections to her kidneys, the connection to her lungs, connections to her heart. They had everything possible connected. So she was completely asleep. So all we could do was sit there, and the nurses would come in and try to explain, this is what you kind of have to watch for. You have to watch for her oxygen levels. You have to watch for her breathing. You have to watch for her kidney levels, make sure that her fluids are clean and this and that. And those are the things that we're looking at. And if your mom starts to make progress, the quicker we can get out of her or get her out of ICU and get her into a normal room. So I would sit there and sit really close to her, and I would talk to my mom, and I'd say, okay, so they said that you have to concentrate on your breathing. So make sure that you breathe calmly, breathe in and out, start using your lungs, start using your kidneys, start, concentrating that your heart is beating as it's supposed to beat, and that the swelling will go down. You can do this. You can control your body. Because she used to say that. She used to say, we control our mind, and our mind controls our body. So our body is kind of like a computer. Our body is the monitor, and our brain is the keyboard. So whatever you type on the keyboard is going to come up on the monitor. So whatever you tell your brain is going to kind of, come through your body. So I started to repeat that to her, and while she was, out, And that's all I kept telling her. And I kept telling her how much I loved her and how much I was there. We weren't going to leave her side. Grandma was taken care of, so she didn't have to worry about that.
Mhm.
And I would tell her updates, and I'd say, you know how she gets stubborn sometimes, and you know how she likes to play these little games with us, and and I just kept talking to her as I was having a conversation. And unfortunately, she did not take 1 week in the ICU. She ended up being there 3 weeks.
Mhm.
And after 3 weeks, after a week, she woke up. And but she couldn't barely talk. She was so her throat was so sore from having the tube down her throat and stuff, and all these other tubes. So talking was a minimum. We had to. She tried her best to write down what she was thinking, and so I kept telling her. I said, the stronger you get, the stronger your body gets, the quicker we can get you into a regular room, recovery room. And she would say, "Don't worry, I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there." But every day it seemed like she was getting weaker instead of getting stronger. And so they prolonged her another 2 weeks in the ICU. So now she was there close to 6 or 7 weeks in ICU. And the thing that bothered me was her hospital room was kind of like a double door kind of room. So the doors would open outward. And they had the doors open most of the time. And there were so many deaths happening on the left and to the right of her. And you would hear people, the doctors saying, "We're sorry, that was all we could do." But it wasn't like in a soft,
Oh,
private type of thing. They would say it loudly. And so you could hear it down the hall. I mean, there was other rooms you could hear. And then the families would be distraught.
oh,
And I would tell my mom, "Don't worry, that's not going to happen to you just because you're
oh,
taking a little bit longer to heal. It's okay. It's just that
oh.
your body's, you know, losing its strength and you got to work at it." And they would ask us to do therapy with her, leg therapy and arm therapy, just so that her circulation would start to work a little bit better. So we would do that with her, and um, we would go the whole day, um, trying to get her to eat a little bit, um, try to get her strength back. In the ICU unit before she went into a regular recovery room. So once she was in the recovery room, she said, "You won't believe the things I saw while I was under." She said, "I went places. I could hear you talking to me. But as you were talking to me, I was in these heavenly rooms and just could see people that I hadn't seen in so long." And I thought, "Oh, did that mean that maybe she was dying, and maybe." And so I wasn't really I wasn't really asking her too much about it because I was afraid that she would want to go back to that and have that relief feeling of, "Oh, out here I'm not feeling pain. I'm not feeling," not that I wanted her to feel the pain, but I didn't want her to um choose that life instead of being here with us. And so after about 3 months or so, they said that they were going to have to release her to a rehab facility. Yeah, I don't know how it is in other parts of the country or in other countries, but these rehab facilities, they're basically people get sent there because either A, your insurance has run out, B, there's nothing more that they can do for you physically, and C, because of that, you're going to spend your remaining days there, and that's going to be it. So they took her to these places that were so run down, so ill-equipped, short-staffed, unpeaceful places where you could hear, it was almost like an asylum as opposed to a place to help people. And so I didn't feel comfortable leaving there overnight, leaving her overnight. So I would stay as late as I possibly could till like maybe 9 or 10, and they were like, you need to go. So my dad got special permission to stay with her overnight. And so he would sleep like in just a regular chair all night long just to stay with her. And I would stay with my grandmother at night. And then in the morning we would switch so my father could rest a little and take care of my grandmother during the day. So after a couple of weeks in one, I said, I just don't like it the way they're treating you here. They were neglectful. You could hear older people yelling and screaming in pain or screaming out of loneliness or dementia, or just, it was just not a peaceful place to recover. So one day she said, I just don't want to be here anymore. And I said, that's all I needed to hear, Mom. I went and I got their wheelchairs weren't even great wheelchairs. They were busted. Like some of them didn't have handles. Some of them you had to like literally push without the wheels turning. So you had to like literally just push like a chair. So I said, that's fine, Mom. We're gonna tell them we're gonna go for a walk outside. And because they were telling me that she was not able to leave, but yet she wasn't getting any care. So I said, Mom, we're just gonna get into the wheelchair. And I grabbed her stuff. I said, I'm gonna go put the stuff in the car first, and then I'm gonna take you out. So I went and put all her stuff in the car, and I masterminded away. I said, we're just gonna go for a little walk outside. And I grabbed a chair, I pushed her in, I got her in the car, and she said, you're my hero. I hated being there. And I just said, you're never going back. You're never going back to another rehab. We took her home. The place called the police, and they said that I had kidnapped one of their patients. So they sent the police to our home, and the cop or the sheriff or whoever he was said, obviously this is not a kidnapping situation. He goes, I've heard so many complaints about that place. Even if you had kidnapped her, I wouldn't have charged you with any kidnapping. He said, I completely understand. And if you're here because you requested to be here, this is obviously a lovely home. You have a lovely family. I can tell there's no neglect or abuse going on. So that'll be that. Don't worry about anything. There'll be no charges or anything. After that, my mom kept getting sicker, and we took her back to she had to do dialysis for once. And so we kept taking her to dialysis. And then they said it's best if she goes to a rehab hospital. And I thought, this is not going to be good. So this place presented itself as a much better rehab facility. It looked like they were overstaffed. It looked clean. It looked friendly. The meals were coming out regularly. And so they set her up in a room, and we were quite impressed. And we thought, okay. And they said, you guys should probably go home and get some rest, meaning me and my father. and you know, she'll be fine for tonight. You guys come back tomorrow. You guys can be here when she has breakfast. They were cleaning her all of her wounds that she had had from open heart surgery. And we've left her in great hands. So we trusted that, and my mom said, please go home. Please go home and get some rest. I will be completely fine here. So we both went home. The next day we went back, and they brought her breakfast. And the first thing I noticed was her muffin, her eggs, and whatever else they were giving her. The eggs were ice cold. The muffin was moldy. The toast was moldy. The fruit they had given her was molded. The milk was expired, you know. And so I went up to the desk and I said, I took the tray up to the desk and I said, how is it possible that she can eat this? This food is all molded. And they apologized and they said, oh, we must have given you the wrong tray. And I'm thinking, well, who were you going to give it to? You know? So
Oh.
they brought us out another tray after a while. Same thing, same food. And I asked my mom, I said, what would you like to eat, Mom? She didn't have that much of a restricted diet at this point. And she was craving egg burritos from a local fast food place. I said, don't worry, I'll go get it. So I went and got it. My dad was furious. But my mom was very afraid that if we spoke up to the nurses, that they would retaliate on her while we were gone. And I said, nobody's going to be gone at this point. We're going to take turns just the way we used to, because you've only been here one night, and now, you know, I'm already dissatisfied. She ended up staying there for 1 month. Within that month, her roommate that was in the same room had passed away. And they left her there for 2 days. And this lady was passed away for 2 days. And my mom, the beds were like facing each other. So they were like feet to feet. But, you know, the room was big enough to where they weren't this close. But they were certainly maybe 10 steps away from each other. So they weren't that far away from each other. And I went to the nurse's station and I said, what kind of facility leaves a person who's passed out or passed away for 2 days? Well, their family's taking a while to get here. I understand that is not either A or B of the case. You need to take this person to the morgue, you know, or to the somewhere. You don't just leave them there. And so they finally took them away, but it took them another day. And so in that day, all they did was put a curtain around her. So my mom for 2 days was sitting there looking at death the whole time. And my mom got really depressed being there. And I asked my mom, I said, would you like to leave this place again? Because, or not again, because this is a different place, but I said, would you like me to take you out again? And she said, yeah, I do. I want to go home. I said, okay, fine. So I started getting her dressed. The doctor came in and he's like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? What are you guys doing? I said, I'm getting her dressed. We're leaving. He said, oh, you need to sign release papers. You can't just get up and go. And I said, I'm pretty sure that I can. And she said, well, I want you to know that if you take your mother out of here, you're going to kill your mother. She's going to die. Just flat out like that. And I said, Well, for you for being a physician, first of all, you have no bedside manner. You're feeding your patients rotten food. I'm the one, and my father is the one who comes in every day to clean up her wounds, to assist her to the bathroom, to assist her with her physical therapy. What does your staff do? Nothing. What is it that you do other than come in, sign a chart, and leave the room? There's nothing that's being done here. We're doing all of the work. So if she would like to do that at home, that's where I'm taking her. So he started to scream at me, started to tell me what kind of daughter would take their mother out of a doctor's care, and that I was being negligent and this and that. And I just let him argue with himself. And I said, just bring me the papers I need and I'll go ahead and sign them. If not, if you're not back in 5 minutes, we're leaving. And my father was defending me the whole time. And so they brought us the papers. I signed them. I wheeled my mom out of there. And so we were still taking her to dialysis. Then one night, she said she needed to go to the hospital. So I took her to a different hospital. They had her there for about a week. They came in and they said, your heart is looking 100% better. Your kidneys are functioning. Your lungs are functioning. Everything is going great. And I didn't believe the doctor. I had this doubt in me. And my mom said, it's like Christmas. Why aren't you happy? I'm cured. I can go home now. And I said, to me, I didn't say this to her, but I remember thinking it. You were just at this other place and you were deathly ill. And in a week, we bring you to this hospital and all of a sudden you're cured. You know, what I didn't know was that the insurance had run out. So they had no more way of helping her unless we were willing to pay out of pocket, which was like $120,000 at the time. So we ended up taking her out of there, brought her home, kept taking her to dialysis. And one night that we took her to dialysis, she says, I'm not feeling well. I said, do you need to go to the hospital? And there was a hospital about 3 blocks down from where her dialysis was. And she said, yeah, I think I need to go to the hospital. So they called an ambulance. We took her to the hospital. And the nurses there, we were so deadbeat tired at that point. We told the nurse, we're just gonna go home and try to sleep a couple hours and we'll be back. And the nurse said, you know, I advise that maybe you guys should stay because her blood pressure is too low for us to do dialysis. We need her blood pressure to start raising, and her blood pressure keeps lowering. And I said to her, you know, this happens all the time with my mom. We're used to we thought we knew better, you know, we thought we had been through all of this for the last 6 months, you know, so we thought, oh yeah, this is normal. Her blood pressure does go down a lot. She has a weakened heart, you know, so it's normal. And the nurse insisted. She said, I just don't want you guys to go home and for me to have to call you to come back in the middle of the night if things worsen. So we thought that's strange and caring of her to do that. So we said, okay, fine. And she said, there's a waiting room that has sleeper sofas. you can just lay there, and it was only like down the hall from where my mom was. So we went over there and just kind of sat around and waited. And we kept checking in like every 15 minutes or so. And I said, can I see my mom? They said, yeah, sure, come on in. And they were being so extremely accommodating that I started to think something's wrong here. And my mom just looked like she was sleeping. Um, and she opened her eyes and she started talking a little bit. And she told my dad, promise me that you'll always believe in Christ. And then a little bit of blood started coming out of her mouth. And that's usually a very bad sign, when you start to bleed from your mouth.
Oh.
And I didn't know that until that point. And so I started cleaning her up, and I tried to get her attention, but she was so fixated on my father. And she just said, please tell me that you will not fall apart in front of Leslie if anything happens. And I was like, Mom, I'm right here. I'm right here. And I kept trying to hold her hand, but she was so fixated on my dad.
Mm.
And my dad just kept agreeing with her and saying, nothing's going to happen. Everything's going to be fine. You just weakened up a little. And once you get your blood pressure up, they'll get your dialysis going. Your heart's going to get better. Everything's going to be fine. And she shook her head, saying no. So I started getting really like my heart started beating a little bit faster, because I'm thinking, she's not looking at me. She's telling my dad something. And I told her, I said, Mom, I love you very much. Don't worry. We're going to have you home soon. And she had only been home prior to that. From the time that they said she was fine, that she was all cured, we took her home for a week. And then we took her to the dialysis, and then that led to us being there that night. And so in talking to her at that point, they said, we're going to have to take her to another room. So they took her to another room, and we said, can we be in that room? And they said, sure, you can be in the room, but you're going to have to sit kind of away from her. And they had machines and all kinds of things. And they said, we're going to have some medical staff come in, but we need you to stay clear of the room, or clear of the medical staff. And we said, okay, fine. And I remember sitting down, and my dad just stood next to me. And all of a sudden, this is when they still used the monitor, the heart monitor that would keep beeping as your heart would beep, right? So all of a sudden, they brought in the electroshock machine, and I hadn't seen it, but my father did. And my father shielded me, and he looked at me and he said, okay, something has come into the room, and it's a very dangerous situation right now. It's a very critical moment. So you need to start praying right now. And I looked at my dad, and I saw I had never seen fear in my father. And I said, I can't live without her. I can't. This cannot be happening. Well, they ended up not using the electroshock machine. And I heard the heart monitor go flat. And I knew in that instant, and the doctor came to us and said, we're going to do CPR right now. This is a very critical moment. And he left. And they were there, and we were sitting there while they gave her CPR. And they tried CPR for about 10 minutes. And then they came back, and the doctor came back and he said, there's nothing that we can do at this point. We have to wait for her. But her heart has stopped. And in that moment, my father said, you have to try. You have to try again. This is my wife. This is her mother. You have to try again. And the doctor just looked at him like, I'm sorry, but okay, I'll try again. They tried again, nothing. They came back and they said, she's gone. And my father said, no, you have to keep trying until she comes back. She knows that she has to come back. And I stood up and I said, you don't understand what my father is telling you. You need to do it one more time. I know that she can do it. So he went back again and they started it up again. And they had a whole team around her. And we could hear them doing it. And they did it for another 15 minutes and yet nothing. And that's when it happened. And of course, I completely lost it. My father tried to console me, but he was losing it as well. They all came, like the whole entire team came over and was hugging us and saying how sorry they were. They said that she didn't really have a chance because of her blood pressure being so low when we brought her in. That her, and then in hindsight, I remember her before going to her dialysis appointment. She was telling me, she was complaining about her kidneys. She kept saying, my kidneys are hurting so bad. Well, that was a sign that her body was shutting down. And she was having shortness of breath. And her lungs were shutting down. Everything was shutting down. But it took her all night to kind of go through that. And so we ended up staying there with her until the coroner came. And I know that you would want to be with your loved one till the very end. But with my dad recently passing away 6-7 months ago, now I realize that it's much better not being in the room when the morgue comes and places your loved one in the black bag, because that just like stamps in your memory. And when my father passed away in February, they asked us to leave the room while they did that. And that was less traumatic, you know. It was very traumatic for me seeing that, and my dad, it was very traumatic for him. I collapsed. My dad's sister was there, and a friend of ours was there. And I collapsed. I literally collapsed to the ground when I saw that happening. And they had to carry me into a waiting room. Like it was like not a waiting room, it was more like a chapel type of room in the hospital. And so they had me wait there. And I remember asking someone if she was in heaven with the God that she believed in. And someone said they believed that she was. And that made it very final for me, you know. And so just being in the room, listening to her flatline, watching them, that was probably that was so traumatic. It was just very, very traumatic. Me feeling helpless, all the should have, could have, would have things that I thought about. I understood it more when my father passed away, that it's probably not the best idea to witness certain things, you know. So that's basically the technical steps that took her to her death.
And you were saying that was 13 years ago? Or 17?
That would have been what was 2005, so almost 19 years.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting how we can remember to the detail so many things in those moments. And I wonder sometimes when with trauma, you know, how you will have something that's a repressed memory, but seeing with these experiences, many people remember every single little detail. Maybe there are parts that maybe you don't remember as well, but it seems like you remember every last step of it. And
Yeah. And I remember the next day, or well, we were there until 9 in the morning. She passed away at around 3 in the morning. And we had to wait 6 hours because they were so busy in the hospital and stuff. And we had waited 6 hours. So we had 6 hours with her. And I remember that day in that afternoon, once we were able to come home, that late afternoon, it must have been around 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I pretty much collapsed on the couch and I fell asleep. And I had this dream that I remember so clearly. I had a dream that she was driving my truck and I was in the front seat and my dad was in the back seat. And she parked in a parking lot and she was crying. And I said, "Mom, why are you crying?" She said, "Because I had to leave you both." And I said, "I know, I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to you." And I said, "We're going to miss you the same." And I was trying not to cry in my dream. And I said, "I hope that you know that I've tried everything that I could to keep you here. And I tried everything I could to tell you everything positive. And I said, I'm just sorry that we didn't say goodbye." And she said, "Don't you remember?" And I said, "What do you mean, don't I remember?" She said, "When I passed away, I was looking right at you." She said, I didn't get a chance to talk to you before. I was talking with your dad." She said, "But when I left looking at you." And I in my real life, I started to when I woke up, I started to go back and think, what did she mean by that? And I remember where I was sitting in the hospital room, I had kind of an angle look towards where her bed was. And when she had passed away, her face was looking right at me. So she told me that in my dream. And I thought, nobody knew that. I didn't tell my dad that. I didn't outspeak that to anything. I didn't tell anybody. It just, I started thinking backwards and I thought, she was looking at me, you know? So I thought, from that point on, I thought, I'm going to believe every dream I have of my mom from now on. And I'm going to try and tell her in my dreams and communicate with her in my dreams about my life. And that's when I started dream journaling, I guess, in my mind. When I dream of her, I tell her all the good stuff and all the bad stuff going on and crazy stuff or funny things. And I see her in my dreams and oh yeah, and I gotta hurry up and tell you all this stuff. And she's standing there with just a smile on her face, listening to me. So I believe that people can visit you that way in dreams. I don't believe that dreams are just memories of the day. I believe that they're messages from the universe, or messages from God, or messages from those who have passed on.
So you still get these dreams of your mom even now?
I still dream. Yeah.
It's so beautiful. What a beautiful thing. Oh, how lovely.
Yeah, and I've recently started to dream of them together. And but I don't get to speak to my dad very often. It's very quick that I see him. So but yeah, I still dream of them.
Children who are my age haven't had this experience, so it's easy to say that, but you know what I mean. I feel, yeah, but for me, initially when I was grieving, I watched Shrek, the original Shrek, over and over and over again, and I found a lot of solace in just watching him and his grumpiness just take this unwanted odyssey. Oh, fine, I'll go on this odyssey, and the soundtrack, and it was also humorous, and I don't know, it's just having and it was rated G, so I could watch it with my kids over and over again. But I suppose, was there any healthy outlets for you that helped you the first little while, I suppose?
In the beginning, there was not. For about, I would say, for the first 10 years, I drowned myself in alcohol. I went the complete opposite route. I couldn't take the pain. I mean, I was a heavy drinker prior to that, but I really dove into it afterwards. And I didn't try to talk about her much to certain people, to a lot of people, because I felt that she was too much of a special person to just kind of talk to anyone about, So I kept my feelings in even for my father. I would keep my feelings in. But it wasn't until I snapped out of my alcoholism and I decided to become sober that I started thinking about how all of the positive influences that she had on me, the education, the writing, the art, the just being an artist in any form, how she pushed that on me, how she pushed using my own mind, how she pushed saying, if you're the one in need, you're the one who has to go after it. Don't depend on someone else to just hand it down to you. So I started after I cleaned up and became sober, I started to honor her by the memories that she made with me. And that's what truly helped me through. That really was. It wasn't a specific thing, but one of the things that I used to love doing with her was on Sundays, we would watch black and white movies, especially Alfred Hitchcock. So I would find comfort in sometimes doing that. It would remind me of her. Um, and now I find myself trying to think like her, trying to be more like her as opposed to myself. And I find myself like, I mean, I still have my own personality and my own um, quick wit or whatever you want to call it, because I got that from my dad. But from her, I I try to achieve to have some of the qualities that she had, some of the characteristics that she had. She, for one, she was a very kind person, a non-judgmental kind person. She didn't look at the person's appearance. She didn't mind how they spoke or what they spoke of. What she looked at or noticed was, how can I love that person? How can I find a way to love that person? What is it about that person that I can find that needs love and kindness? So it didn't matter who the person was, what lifestyle they lived, so long as she could find a way to love that person. And I think that's what's one of the things that I've been trying to do the most of, is try to look for the good in a person, not judge the person, and just try to love that person for who they are. So I think that's what's helped me a lot, is just her characteristics, thinking of her every day. The old movies, they bring me laughter of when her and I used to watch the movies. And Hitchcock had a great influence on my writing because I had been watching him since I was a kid. She would put it on and she'd say, now this is a mystery. Now this is a scary movie, because they didn't need special effects. They didn't have special effects. The actor had to act it out, and the writer really had to put it out there. She would break it down for me like that and make it interesting. So I would think, this thing could really happen to somebody, or and that's what drew me to writing. So that's something fun that I remember about her.
I love that. Do you find, and a lot of people I know that have lost their moms, do you find that you're reminded of your loss as you move about the world and seeing daughters and mothers together? And I call it, me and my cousin, we share this theory. We call it grocery store rage. My cousin also has children, and when you see the three generations in the grocery store, it kind of, not necessarily rage or even jealousy, it's just a reminder of what we don't have, and it's hard. And it never will go away. It feels like it's a bond that once you lose that person and their body not being here, and like you said, it does change, because we have, I'm the same as you. I do believe that we're able to still have some kind of connection to our loved ones once they pass, and even, like you said, the universe can still send us messages through a dream, or even just through things in our life, for sure. But specifically our moms in this case, as someone who's passed away. But that day-to-day interaction and that space they hold in our lives, or they did hold in our lives. It's hard having these reminders, and I just went on way too long about that. But do you know what I mean? And are there things that are more difficult for you, or is it just I don't know, I guess just if that's something that happens for you as well. Do you experience grocery store?
Yeah, no, it absolutely happens. It when I see a mom and maybe a girl who's, you can tell it's obviously her daughter, and she's like 13, 15 years old and goofing off with her mom, or saying, let's do this, mom, or let's do that. And I can hear them kind of being playful with one another. I miss that, and I find myself stopping to admire it, because it's something that me and my mom used to do. We used to goof around. Back in those days, we used to go to the mall to shop for clothes, right? It wasn't so much online. And we would have laughter spouts. I mean, just because I used to pick out the craziest clothes to put on, and I'd show her these, totally out of my character outfits or whatever, and she would just laugh and laugh, and I used to talk her ear off while we were going grocery shopping, and she would always say, "Why do you feel like talking about life when we go grocery shopping?" And so she would just laugh, and things like that. And when I see mother and daughters, even just softly interacting, a mother brushing her daughter's hair from her face, or just things like that, it reminds me of the times that I did have with my mom. And yeah, I get a little envious, I guess. And I think about how sweet and tender those moments were, but and they, at the same time, it's like bittersweet, because it brings a smile to my face that I had that moment, but at the same time, I don't have those moments anymore. So, and she doesn't get to see me as an adult. I mean, I'm sure she does get to see me, but she doesn't get to see my successes or my failures. And I don't get to say, "Mom, this didn't work out," or, "I'm kind of disappointed at this or that," or "Hey, guess what? I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I heard this new song," and, just like with my father, that was one thing that I shared with my father. Anytime I heard some new music, I would knock on his door and say, "Hey, I heard this new song. I want you to listen to it and get your opinion on it," And with my mom, it was always, "Oh, I got this new writing idea. What do you think?" And so, yeah, those moments when I see other moms and their daughters together, or I think I remember how fun that was. I remember how sweet that was. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
I've been muting my mic all along because there's a lot of traffic outside, and I'm sitting in probably the worst room in the house. So I'm sorry for that if that's caused any weirdness on the audio.
I didn't hear anything.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Well, hopefully when I go back to edit, it doesn't pick up. But well, gosh, thank you so much for sharing your story. That was a long haul of a lot of endurance on behalf of you and your dad. And goodness, like my mom died suddenly, so there was nothing to do with the hospital. She was taken directly to the funeral place, and that's when I saw her. So yeah, sounds like you lost her repeatedly that one night.
She had so many scares before, and was able to pull through. But I remember her telling me, if anything happens, it's just that my body couldn't take it anymore, And I would tell her, no, you're strong, you're gonna be okay, you're gonna be, you know, it was a part of denial, I guess, because we had seen her survive some of the worst things. And so I guess that's what happened. She just could not come back and deal with the pain anymore. So that's, I believe that's pretty accurate. The way you placed it is, or said it is that we were kind of, there was no accepting or even considering that, oh, you might pass away. You know, there was a moment where I had, when she was at home, I did say to her, because she asked me what was wrong, because I was cleaning up the kitchen and we had her kind of like in a hospital bed downstairs. And she said, why are you cleaning so much? And she used to tell me, when I get depressed, clean the house. She said, if you ever get depressed, clean, and that'll take care of your depression. And so I was cleaning like up and down, I was cleaning everything in the kitchen, the refrigerator. She said, are you depressed? And I said, no, I'm just trying to take my mind off of stuff. And she said, well, that's the same thing. And, you know, you have your mind on so many things that it depresses you. And you're doing something to try to release that. And I sat down with her and I said, to be honest, Mom, I don't know if you're going to live or die. And I want to know what's going to happen. Because I don't want to be unprepared. I don't want to not be ready. And she said, I don't know if I'm going to live or die either. And we both kind of had a moment of, like, we both didn't have the answer. Yeah. Which was very rare, you know. Either I had an answer or she had an answer to the problem, you know. And in that moment, neither one of us had an answer. So we just kind of sat there in silence. And then I went back to my cleaning, and that was a moment that I'll always remember as well, because you don't know when that's going to happen. Even when someone's sick, you don't know if they're going to get better or if they're not, you know. So
I guess when it comes to stages of grief, like denial is one of the stages, and you can jump around. And even I remember years after my mom died, I even was in denial. I didn't feel like, I felt like she was coming back. She was just away. Because my dad and my mom would take me and my sister on really long trips a lot when we were growing up. And then after me and my sister were adults, and she died not that long after we were adults, just a few years. But it was kind of like I could tell myself that she was going to be back. And I often did. And for years, like it would be, I would catch myself. So denial is a tricky one. And even when your mom, like yours was, had some serious health challenges, we don't want to consider that that's something. But it sounds like you did have a moment where you did kind of look at that. You pulled it out, you pulled that difficult thing out, and you were like, this is something. And you spoke with her about it, which is, I think, a beautiful moment. But as far as considering the idea, you were still, like you said, you had resisted it all the way until the end.
Go through that denial stage, because for the first, I don't know, a few months, she passed away in September. So the weather was changing during that time. And I kept my front door open with my screen door closed. And anyone who attempted to close the door, I would say, no, don't close the door. And I would think, because my mom's coming back and I want the door to be open. I don't
Yeah.
want her to have to suffer to try to find her keys or anything. She doesn't have her keys with her. So
Oh,
I was in that much denial, thinking she's gonna come through the door any minute now. So I would sleep on the couch for months, which was by the front door. And my dad would say, we have to close it at night.
mhm.
I would only let my father close it at night. But as soon as in the morning when I woke, I would have to open it. I would have to open it. And then I think the mortality of my husband and myself, and I've had other family members who have passed away, but didn't affect me because I
Mhm.
wasn't close with them, you know.
Right.
So I think until your own person, the person that means the most to you, passes away, I think that's when you start to understand grief in other people.
Yeah, even
Um,
in the small amount of time I've been doing this, even with the first go around, I've had a few attempts at this. I've learned, and it's just been learning. And when we learn, we grow, and it's helpful in this journey because, like you had said earlier, it doesn't end. It's an ongoing part of our lives. And when we lose loved ones, like you said, like you go through it every time, and it doesn't go away either. It stays with you, and it's just something you kind of carry with you. But we're not alone, and there's a community out there of people who've been through the same experience.
well, you're amazing to start this off, and hopefully it's a successful one, and you'll have plenty of people to share their experience and everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you again for your time and for sharing your story.
Thank you.